Something I had seen as a student, as a high school student. I had seen previous exhibitions, and only a few years later I'd basically gone from 0 to 60 in being included in this show. As I said, a pretty incredible experience for a student being included in this, and I was pretty blown away. But I certainly wanted to make the most of it, and so I rushed my reply letter back to them and said, yes, of course, I'll be in the show. And that was a great experience for me. It had about 200 artists in it, and some of BC's most respected artists were shown in Artropolis 90. And it was from here that a dealer in Vancouver, Diane Ferris, saw my work and invited me to show with her at an invitational. And I'd actually been, sort of had a secret desire, if ever I had to choose, that would be the gallery that I would want to become a part of. And here I was getting the call just sort of out of the blue, and it really was something of a shocker. So, but they had a great reputation, and they still do, as being not only a commercial gallery, but a gallery that really shows the finest of contemporary art as well, art that, you know, that is really quite in touch with today's themes and trends. She invited me to show at an invitational at her gallery in January of 1991. And of course I jumped at the chance, and I had some works in process, and I just feverishly spent weeks and weeks getting them all done. So I had about a dozen works to show at the invitational. And I just basically kept my foot in the door. I just really sort of would continue to just pester them as best as I could to take me on as part of their stable. So this piece is a part of a series called Heaven's Prayer. And again, I'm just working with sort of mystery images. I'm shooting friends, just hanging out, and just spending time and looking closely at the world around me, and just kind of work those themes into painting. And so this was shown at the invitational at Diane Ferris, as well as this piece, which is another piece from the series Heaven's Prayer. And these are large works. Again, they're 6 by 4 feet. And I think you can see here maybe a little bit of sort of pop culture's kind of creeping in. And I think at this point it wasn't something that I really wasn't terribly conscious of, because I was still just sort of looking at art history and looking at contemporary artists working in a figurative style like Eric Fischel, and as well as a Canadian artist named Alex Colville, who is a very influential and famous artist still. Just working the mystery puzzle themes for whatever it was really worth. So, but again, like I say, I just, for some bizarre reason, found myself in this situation, and I really wasn't going to, in the situation of being with a commercial gallery, and I was fortunate enough right away to sell some works, which again came as something of a surprise. So I really thought that, you know, this is my big chance, and I best not louse it up. So I certainly, at this time, was fortunate enough to be able to work full-time doing it, and kind enough to have my parents still allow me to live at home and work from there just for the next few years to really sort of get a solid footing. So in 1992, I had a solo show with Diane Ferris, and I'd also been fortunate enough to show in a few other outlets in Vancouver. Richmond Art Gallery, which is a community art gallery. I had a solo show just briefly before I got on with Diane Ferris. And this work, which is from a series called The Reverent Mind, is probably, I chose this work definitely to illustrate probably the first time that I was really conscious of pop culture themes coming in and starting to play an equal role in what the people were doing and what the situations were. I mean, up to that point, I'd been focused on working on the human figure and showing people hanging out. You know, when you're young in your early 20s, that's just sort of thing you tend to do. You'll hang out at the Burger King or the Dairy Queen. And I think this was a case of having finished a painting and really sort of sat and looked at it and went, you know, I think there's something a little bit more going on here. So hopefully try to have a little bit of humor as well. But I think this would, after sort of 5 years of really solidly working as a student and then becoming a professional artist, this was really kind of the turning point from kind of the domestic side to really sort of looking out into the world. And this is a piece called Fast Food Experience 1, which is from the first solo show I had at Diane Ferris, which was titled Show of Recent Works. And I guess this kind of sums up a lot of what I'd been doing before, plus looking out into the world. At this point, I'm really becoming conscious of those themes, and really, I mean, almost, sort of initially, almost out of, you know, kind of a nostalgia of the present, I guess you could say, of this is really the world that I was a part of, and this was a world that surrounded me and my friends, and the people were important, but these themes are really starting to come in. And I really started to think about how consumerism is really the prime center of focus in our society, and really what an important thing it is. This is kind of a goofy work. It's kind of like a sort of a drug deal in my mind. You know, in many ways we're all addicted to these sort of junk foods and that kind of thing, and these guys are just sort of doing a deal in the back alley. This is from my next solo show at Diane Ferris, which was in 1993, which was called Freshly Oven Baked. And definitely by this point my pop culture themes had really come to the fore. And again, I try to work a little bit of humor in, because you know, hanging out with your friends is usually a fun thing. And I think part of the reason I paint my friends is a way to kind of keep them around when I'm working and they're not there. It's a fun way to include them and sort of keep them sort of fresh in my mind. And this piece is called Cool Treats, and it's fairly large. It's about 7 by 5 feet. I think this is kind of a landmark work for me. This is a piece called Wrath of the Devourers, which is from 1993, from the Freshly Oven Baked series. And this was at a time when, in the media, sort of stories of kids in big cities being sort of mugged for their jackets and their shoes and that kind of thing was really coming out. And it sort of struck me that people would mug you for, you know, sort of the brand on your back rather than the money in your pocket. And I guess, you know, superficially that's what this piece is about. Technically, this is one of the last pieces that I did using an older style system of working from photographs and then graphing up and sketching them out from sketches, or I'm sorry, from photographs, and then doing sort of all the drawing by hand, and then kind of being a bit of an organic process. From here, I've gone on to using, just sort of purely for efficiency reasons, gone to using slides to do the main layout, and I'll show you some stuff about that a little later on. So this piece almost more or less immediately followed the previous piece, and this is a piece called Cola Wars, A Tale of Two Sodas, two West Side Story kind of gangs facing off, with one side's got Coke and the other's got Pepsi. This was a piece that was done in a brand new studio that I finally was sort of able to move out into the world and operate. So not only did I have a lot more space, I think just having a bigger workspace made a lot of difference for me and technically. And this was also one of the very first pieces I did using slides to help me in the layout process. But again, I think it shows a mix of of a little bit of seriousness and a little bit of humor. I think that hopefully will go towards representing, you know, sort of my thoughts and feelings on pop culture, which is frankly at times a little sort of ambiguous. I feel kind of, depending on the day, I'm sort of more pro and more anti-advertising than I will be on other days. This is a piece from my next series of work, which was shown at Diane Ferris in 1994, called Product Placement. In looking at the pop themes and looking at consumerism, I felt that the food products, you know, specifically fast food products, really were the best symbol of consumer culture, because I mean they're literally something that's consumed and sort of just as quickly forgotten. And the themes for this show were basically the modern ways that we get our food. Living in the, you know, sort of the time of the late 20th century, there's not a heck of a lot of us. I mean, there's some of us, but the bulk of us sort of got our food from supermarkets and vending machines and convenience stores and fast food restaurants. Those four things I was trying to tackle with this show. So this is one of a series of 4 pop machine pieces. And again, I'm working with sort of preconceived themes. I guess I'm still working with kind of the mystery factor and setting it against that pop culture background and sort of a Judas kiss, kind of a betrayal sort of a thing. But it's always been my intention to never have a painting that's sort of easily interpreted. People see things a multitude of different ways, and different people will give me different interpretations of different works. And this piece called KFC FLG, which actually stands for Finger Looking Good, but I thought that was a bit inappropriate maybe as a title. This is a pretty important piece sort of in my career. As in the previous thing where I suggested sort of a Judas kiss, I think a lot of my looking at sacred imagery and really seeing the clash between the sort of the secular consumer world that we live in and the sacred world of, you know, sort of the pre-19th century was really made for an interesting contrast. And personally, I'm not an adherent to any organized religion or a Christian or any sort of kind of overtly spiritual fellow. But I really liked a lot of the power of sacred imagery, and it really seemed to fit in really quite well with consumerism. And this piece was done in 1994. And it was here, after having, a fairly stable career as a working and selling artist with Diane Ferris, that my career took a kind of a really interesting detour for about 16 months. A collector, a patron of Diane Ferris Gallery, saw this work, a gentleman who'd collected my work before, who actually prefers to remain anonymous, but he was a parishioner at a church in Vancouver called St. David's Anglican, which was just kind of a small congregation in East Vancouver. And he saw this work, and it put him in the mind to ask me if I would do a commission for his church called The Way of the Cross. Just as a bit of history, it's a series of 14 paintings that are used in Catholic and High Anglican churches for devotional use. And remember, it follows the condemnation of Christ at the pavement in Jerusalem up to and including his crucifixion and entombment. So that kind of really came out of left field, because I'd been looking at religious art and kind of touching on it here and there in some of my paintings. But now I was really being asked to kind of jump in with both feet on a religious topic. So initially I just sort of said no. I didn't really think I was capable of doing that, painting sort of a religious